Here's the sound of a chromatically descending bass line. Now, to my ears, that doesn't sound that good, but if you surround it with just the right notes, you can transform it into a beautiful and elegant sounding chord progression. Progressions that sound like that, I think your first step should be to master the lament bass. Lament bass is an extremely old composing technique. It's been around for hundreds of years, and it's still showing up today in music of every style. Today we'll be exploring that concept past its limits, and by the end of this video we'll be writing music that goes way beyond the confines of just the regular major or minor scale. As we go along, I'll have a few composing challenges for you as well that are guaranteed to help strengthen your ability to harmonize a melody. I'll be sharing my own compositions, but also those of my Patreon students and members. So you're going to get a wide, diverse range of music. To begin, let me explain what a lament bass really is. First off, it's a bass voice, so that means it's going to be the lowest voice that we hear in a progression. Second, it has to descend, it has to move downward in stepwise motion, so we can only jump in whole steps or half steps. No big jumps like thirds or fourths or fifths. Lastly, it has to start on the first note of a key and then end on the fifth note of the key. So it's moving all the way from the tonic to the dominant. And with those rules in place, what I'd like to do is approach our first challenge, which is to write a lament bass purely in the major key. It never leaves the notes of the major key. So for example, here's the notes of the C major scale. With those notes, I can build these triads. And what I'm going to do is start on the first note, which is C, and I'm going to descend, a half step or a whole step. But since I have to stay in scale, the only option I have is B. So I'll move to B. The only option I have from here would be to go a whole step to A, and then a whole step to G. We've reached our fifth, so that is our lament bass. C, B, A, G. That simple 4-note pattern is going to be our bass line. Now, how do you harmonize that bass line? How do you give each one of those notes its own chord? Well, the simplest thing you could do is just look at the triads for each one of those chords. So for C, I could give it C major. For B, I could give it B diminished. For A, I could give it A minor. And for G, I could give it G major. But there's way more options than that. I want to keep starting on the C major, but for this B note, I really don't like the B diminished, and I have other options. One of those options would be to take the G chord and invert it. This is the power of inversions. It gives you new bass notes. And now I have this beautiful chord, G/B. So moving from C to G/B sounds very nice. And then that could move to A minor, and that could move to G. Or I could invert my natural 3 chord. If you look at my E minor chord, that has a B in it. So I could move from C major to E minor/B. And then I could move to A minor. Another excellent option. Once again, this A minor chord doesn't have to be A minor. Think of all the other chords that are around that have A in it. F has an A in it, so if I invert my F chord, I have a great chord with A on the bass. D minor has an A in it, so I could play A in second inversion and get that A on the bass. So you see, even though we have this very restrictive bass line, there's a lot of choices we can make as composers to make that bass line work, all while staying in the scale. And with that in mind, I do want you to think about stopping here and actually trying to write your own lament bass chord progression purely in a major key. That's the exact challenge I posed to my Patreon subscribers earlier this year when I did a 3-part masterclass on the lament bass. All the slides and videos I did for that presentation are still available on my Patreon, so if you're interested in some more detail on this topic, do sign up to my Patreon. There's links below in the description. Now, to the submissions I got back, my favorite came from Paul. Paul decided to write in the key of D instead, so that meant his lament bass had to use the notes D, C sharp, B, and A. And with that limitation, he was able to come up with this wonderful guitar intro. But what I really enjoyed about Paul's submission is he took the same chord progression and then arranged it for really heavy electric guitars to make it sound something like a Creed song. And I really had to hold back from adding my own bad Creed-style vocals. So we're just going to play it as is instead of letting me ruin it. Now that challenge was very restrictive. You had to stick to just the 7 notes of a major scale. So let's bump things up in complexity a little bit by moving over to the minor scale. Here's the 7 notes of A minor, and with just those notes you can build these triads. However, instead of sticking to just these 7 notes, it's important to know that most minor key music also uses these 7 notes, the notes of the harmonic minor scale. And you can see that G has become G sharp, and with that set of notes you can create a whole new batch of chords. So now, when you're writing a lament bass in the minor key, you can draw from either of these sets to craft your bass line or to craft the chords on top. For example, if we start on A, our first note, we have to descend a half step or a whole step. Well, we could go to G sharp, that comes from harmonic minor, and then we could move to G from natural minor. And to harmonize that, we still have lots of options. I'm going to keep it simple by putting A minor on my first note, but for G sharp, think of all the chords from A harmonic minor that use G sharp. Personally, my favorite would be this chord, E over G sharp, just my inverted dominant chord. That change from A minor is very lovely. And then from there, of course, I could move to G, and I could finish things off to complete a lament bass in A minor. But there are lots of choices when you start working with 2 scales. So I want you to stop and think about how can you write a lament bass now that you've got access to 2 scales at the same time. And if you do a really good job, you might write something that is enjoyable as the piece that Aaron submitted through my Patreon. He used the lament bass only at the end of his piece, which kept it from getting too repetitive. He also made the wise choice of changing the harmonic rhythm in places, so some chords changed faster than other chords. And my favorite thing is he found a way to move over to the relative major of C major and also do a lament bass in C major, even though we were in the key of A minor. So I thought it was very clever, it sounded really good, and I couldn't resist but adding some guitar parts on top. So that piece used the notes of the A minor scale and also the notes of the A harmonic minor scale. What if we also enable the use of a third scale, A Dorian? Hopefully you know that A Dorian is commonly mixed with the minor scale. Those two kind of go hand in hand. To create a Dorian scale, all you do is raise the 6th of a minor scale. And here, when we do that, we now have access to the note F sharp. So if I wanted to write a lament bass and include the note F sharp as part of it, I can, because I can think of the A Dorian scale and I can think of the chords in the A Dorian scale. Clearly, it's got an F sharp diminished chord in there, but that's not the only option. We could play the D major that's in A Dorian, and we could invert it to play over F sharp, or we could play the B minor in A Dorian and have that over F sharp as well. So now I will challenge you to write a lament bass in the minor key that uses every single note in between the root and the 5th. We can do that now, and we'll have an easy system to figure out what chords will sound good on top. And to do this, you'll have to juggle between notes and chords of A minor, A harmonic minor, and A Dorian. And here's my solution to that puzzle. For A, I'll play A minor. For G sharp, I'll play E over G sharp. For G, I'll play G major, but I'll also play C over G. For F sharp, I'll play D over F sharp. And then for F, I'll play F major. And for E, I'll play E major. And that gives me a wonderful little chord progression. To turn it into an actual song, here's what I did. I took those same chords and just programmed them in on church organs and choir sounds. Then I added a triplet bass groove on the drums. I played those same triplets just using palm mutes, working down. Then I found a harpsichord sample. And lastly, I added a guitar solo. getting into real chromaticism here. That last bass line worked all the way chromatically from A down to E. What I'd like to do is make sure we can do that same kind of trick, but in major keys. So let's return to C major, and you'll immediately recognize we can't make chromatics when we stay to the C major scale. We'll have to start bringing in some other scale here. And I think the easiest thing you can do is just bring in the C minor scale. The C minor scale has all these cool notes and all these cool chords that sound really good when we bring them into our C major compositions. We think of that as borrowing those chords. And now that I'm working with both these scales, I can write a lament bass that starts on C and moves chromatically down through all those notes because I'm working with two scales instead of just one. And to harmonize that bass line, it's quite simple. We use the same tricks as before. I'll start on C major. For the B note, I'll use E minor / B. For the B flat, I'll grab the B flat chord from the minor scale. For the A note, I'll just play an A minor chord from the major scale. For A flat, I'll just play an A flat major chord. And then when we finally get to the 5, I'll just do a nice suspended resolution back to C. And I have a chromatic lament bass in the major key by using modal mixture. And my challenge to you is to write a chromatic lament bass chord progression with a major key tonic. You don't have to do the minor major modal mixture like I did. There's other things you could stumble across. There's literally infinite options. I'm just trying to give you an easy strategy for pretty much always succeeding, always finding gold when you use those two scales. But there are other options as well. For example, you might write something like my Patreon member Mirko. He took a C major chord. He simply dropped the bass note to make a C major / B. Then he made a B flat full diminished, or an E full diminished over B flat, and then an A7, which resolves to A flat, and then finally G. It creates this wonderful little chord loop that I really enjoy. So I think that's a pretty good exploration of the lament bass, but it does just stop at the 5th. What if you want to continue your chromatic descent past the 5th? Well, I do think it gets a little bit trickier once you move on past the 5th. For example, in the key of C, after I get to 5, the next note is the tritone. So what kind of chords do I want to bring into my C major scale that use the tritone? Well, there's none in the C minor scale, so maybe we want to start consulting another scale. Maybe we want to start borrowing from a different scale. And this is where it really helps to know more about modes and chords and secondary dominants. I know that it's very common to mix the C major scale with the C Lydian scale. The C Lydian scale has an F sharp instead of an F. And with that F sharp, I could build chords like F sharp minor 7, flat 5, or D / F sharp. And not only are those nice sounding chords to bring into my composition, I have an easy way to work with them by just thinking of the Lydian scale. Also, when you venture past the 5th, it's a very good opportunity to use all of your bag of tricks chords. Hopefully you've been collecting chords like secondary dominants and chromatic mediants and tritone substitutions, augmented sixths, all the stuff that I teach on this channel, and definitely all the stuff I teach in my book, The Chord Progression Codex. The more fun little unique chords you know, then the more options you have when it comes around to harmonizing some weird note. But really the options are limitless, and there is no one way to do this. I'm just trying to give you these simple strategies using modal mixture and borrowed chords. So with all that in mind, I want to walk you through a chord progression that I've written that uses a complete chromatic descent in through the bass. And I'll try to briefly describe how I'm thinking about these chords and where they came from. Do keep in mind, chords don't really have to come from anywhere, so it's just kind of my thoughts on each chord. For my first note C, I play a C major 7 chord. For the note B, I play a G / B chord. For the note B flat, I borrow the 5 chord and I invert it. For the A note, I play an inverted 4 chord. For the flat 6, that's A flat, I'm going to borrow F minor and I'm going to invert that to give me that beautiful chord. To get to 5 G, I'm going to invert the tonic chord, so I have C / G. Now I've got the tritone F sharp. I'm going to dip into Lydian to get this beautiful F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which I'm going to resolve to F minor, coming from the minor scale. Here, I'm going to go to E minor, which is my mediant chord. This chord, I'm thinking of it as a B9 over E flat. Basically, that's just the dominant chord of the E minor that I just played. And now I'm going to play a G chord over D to get D on the bass. And then lastly, I need to get flat 2 on the bass, and I'm going to use a tritone substitution for that chord right here, which is going to be D flat 7 flat 5. And then finally, I can resolve to C major 7 again. And I swear that for a long time I never thought I'd be able to write a chord progression like that. Too jazzy, too complicated, too intricate. But you can see that with just the basic skills of modal mixture and inversions, you can get most of the way there with these descending and even ascending lines. Now, it's important to realize that this entire video, we've been strengthening our ability to harmonize a melody. Except our melody was a bass melody. So now that you've got the idea of this concept of let's take a sequence of notes and add notes to it, well, instead of keeping those notes on the bass, maybe consider putting them on top. So try writing a chord progression with an ascending or descending chromatic melody on top instead of on the bottom. And lastly, I have to say, if you're confused on any of this stuff, or if you're just really enjoying it, you should consider getting my book, The Chord Progression Codex. It's a comprehensive cover-to-cover guide on pretty much all of the chords and how you're supposed to use them. There's way more detail in that book than I can ever cover in my videos, and the reviews are great, so I do highly recommend it. And on a final note, thank you to my Patreon subscribers for not only providing the music for this video, but providing the support to enable me to make these kinds of videos. Without Patreon subscribers, I can't do this. I can't just make free lessons and not pepper you with advertisements. So they have my appreciation, and I hope they have yours as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.